Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. And we've got another Death on Mars segment for you today, which means that Marina is in the house along with her best friend and codependent shadow known as Scratch the Chihuahua. Marina and I were just out in Memphis this past weekend for the big Ferrell show at Overton Shell. Now, if you've never been to the Overton Shell in Memphis, Tennessee, you need to go check that place out. That place is pretty much the height of snugness. Marina and I went out to Memphis on Saturday afternoon, and I've talked about this on the channel. I talked about it Saturday before we left town. How much I just love Memphis. And every time I go to Memphis, it fails to disappoint me. It always lives up to my hopes and expectations. For me, I would make the argument that it is a place that I feel much more at home at than I do here in Nashville. Now, Nashville's great. It's been a good home for us. We've done pretty well out here. But when it comes to feeling at home and feeling as if you're part of a community, to me, Memphis has a lot more to offer than, say, Nashville. But before we get into this show, I mean, why don't you tell people a little bit about your feelings of the city of Memphis? And now, you haven't been going to Memphis as long as I have, but...
True. Yeah, I don't know. Memphis is rock and roll and Nashville is country music. And I think Jamie and I tend to gravitate more towards the rock and roll culture. It was the biggest city for a long time in Tennessee, especially where I'm like the 1940s, 50s. So the architecture is amazing, kind of feels almost like St. Louis. And I think I gravitate towards cities on the Mississippi River. I'm sure if you live in Memphis, maybe you're tired of the whole blues music thing. But I do love blues music history, especially Delta blues and Robert Johnson and kind of the history and the lore. And there's just something kind of magical about Memphis.
Yeah, it has much more of a sort of DIY,
yeah,
sort of punk rock underground there than Nashville does. Now, again, Nashville is great in a lot of ways. I'm not sitting here trying to bash on it, but it's just a lot more authentic. Nashville tends to feel a little bit more like LA, which I like LA for what it is, but it is sort of an entertainment city. People here tend to be a little bit impressed with themselves, whereas Memphis has a more authentic. I'm drawn to cities that have an authenticity. Like she said, I have a real connection to the Mississippi River. I don't exactly know where that comes from because I am from California, but there's just something about the Mississippi River that I just feel this weird connection to. Maybe it's a past life type thing. I literally don't doubt that.
We got married right in the Mississippi.
And we got married in Memphis 2 years ago. So. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into this weekend a little bit. We got a lot to cover. We went to 4 shows over the weekend.
In one night. Can you believe it?
Yeah, a couple of old fogies like us out on the town.
Long time since we've done that.
But we got to the Overton Shell on Saturday afternoon. Marina had the opportunity to bring her parents along with her. Her mother is also a big Sierra Ferrell fan. We didn't even know that until after.
No, she didn't know that until I think she just puts on a lot of kind of Spotify Americana playlists, and Sierra Ferrell obviously is all over those. And we get to the show and Sierra Ferrell's playing. My mom's like, oh my God, I love her. I've been listening to her all the time. So that was kind of cool. And they live not too far away. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of get them out of their little town in Tennessee for a while. And
So before we get into this specific show, why don't you tell people just a tiny bit about your fan origin story and how you discovered the music?
Yeah, Sierra Ferrell is just part of that community that we're kind of seeing people get more and more popular, of like the Charlie Crockett, the Lost Dog string bands, the Tyler Childers, the Billy Strings, of these sometimes street performers who just years and years and years put in the work and played music and have a love for it and love roots music. And now, especially through like Gems on VHS and Western AF, these people are finally kind of getting their moment in time just because they're talented, which I love to see. So Sierra Ferrell is definitely part of that. She's part of, I think, the roots music that's kind of coming up and becoming more popular. I love to see her becoming more popular. I think she deserves it, and she's worked crazy hard. And, I don't care if somebody's related to some, director, some big producer at, Virgin Records or whatever, if that still exists. I want to see somebody because they're genuinely talented, and she is talented in every way.
What's interesting, you just mentioned this a second ago. What's interesting, and I'm not the biggest country music guy in the world. I'm not an expert. That's why Marina is here today. But you were talking about the Gems on VHS and Western AF social media networks, which is responsible, I think, for sort of propping up a lot of these artists. Artists you mentioned, Nick Shoulders, Sarah Farrell, Lost Dog Street Band, Matt Heckler, Charlie Crockett. And it's funny because that, to me, is sort of the modern equivalent to what country music did back in the day when it came to the Grand Ole Opry and the Louisiana Hayride. It's just sort of the 21st century version of that. And I think a lot of these artists, and I think they would acknowledge it, but I think a lot of these artists do owe a lot to these sort of, Western AF and Gems on VHS, these social media networks that have promoted a lot of this music. And, I come from much more of a punk rock fan background, and even I acknowledge that a lot of this stuff, based on the fact that so much of it is like so DIY, and there is a community around it, this has sort of become one of the next or newest subcategories in the punk rock world, at least in my opinion. Again, I'm not an expert. That's why Marina is here. Anyway, we got to the Overton Shell Saturday afternoon, and I got to tell you, and I don't want to sound like the old guy sitting on his porch talking about the weather, but in Memphis in August, son, it gets pretty hot. But I got to tell you, by the time the sun went down, it was actually really
it was perfect. I thought it was great, yeah. Maybe because it was just so hot earlier and having a little bit... I will say also the Shell is very shaded towards later in the day. Show didn't start till 6:30, and the trees kind of gave a lot of shade, and it was very comfortable. So,
but if you're a fan of music and you are like me and you are a total dweeb for the history of music, the Overton Shell is a place that is just literally dripping with history. I mean, I am a huge Elvis Presley fan, and back in 1954, this is the venue that Elvis Presley played his first ever professional concert, which to me is just unbelievable that venue is still standing there. And you can walk up and you can touch that stage and you can think that, man, Elvis Presley played here in 1954. And the thing I like about it is sort of like the Ryman. People seem to really appreciate the venue. They have a lot of appreciation for the history. They respect the grounds. You don't see people littering and being gross. Anyway, we got to the show, and right around 7:45 or whatever it was, Sierra Farrell's opening band or opening artist came out. Now, this was somebody that I knew literally nothing about, apart from the fact that I know he is a Gems on VHS cast member, if that's the right word, but somebody that I think you knew a little bit more about, certainly than I did, because you couldn't know less about him than I did, and that is from, I believe he said he is from right near Fayetteville, Arkansas, and that is Nick Shoulders.
Yeah, he was great. He's not somebody I also knew about a lot either. He's sort of in the Gems on VHS crew. I'd seen some of his stuff. But he surprised me. I think I enjoyed his music better with a backing band, and he is just a likable character. He spoke a lot about, preserving, trees and nature and protecting things that are important. And he talked about, growing up in the forest and learning to sing, and whistling is sort of his thing. And he's a talented guy. It was cool. He talked about growing up in the punk rock scene too, which we always appreciate. Mm-hmm. And his band was great. To me, they kind of had they have the country western bluegrass feel to it, but I think with the electric guitars, I almost got some Cramps kind of vibes from them. They were fun. Yeah.
That's interesting. He's somebody that I knew virtually nothing about, apart from the fact that I think I may have seen a couple of his videos on the Gems on VHS YouTube channel, and the stuff that I had seen was basically just him and an acoustic guitar. And like you said, he had a backing band. All of his players were great. As a matter of fact, he is a very positive person, and it's sort of interesting because I was sort of watching this as he was playing, because he spoke very eloquently and very passionately about topics like inclusivity and protecting the environment. And it's funny because him and Sierra Ferrell and a lot of these artists both have roots in the sort of the punk rock world. I mean, Nick Shoulders talked about during his set how he came up playing in punk bands in Arkansas, and I'm not exactly sure how you transition from punk into what he does now, apart from the fact that I do think that this hobo punk is sort of part of the punk rock family. But what's funny is he and Sierra Ferrell both talked about things like, protecting the environment and social inclusivity. And it's funny because I find their fan base, and maybe I'm wrong, but the fan base of this sort of hobo punk world is just infinitely interesting to me, because you've got people like me who are, well, hopefully they're not like me, but you've got people that come from more of the, punk rock, sort of mindset in that universe. And then you've got people who are sort of the typical traditional country music fans. And I'm not going to sit here and pick on people that are traditional country music fans, but you kind of get the sense that the crowd is a little bit divided when they talk about some of their political opinions, because you got some people there you could tell that weren't necessarily loving all the inclusivity chat by these people that they consider to be country music. But I got to tell you, and again, this was somebody that I knew nothing about, but I found his attitude just to be refreshing. You could tell that he was just in the moment. He was coming home from tour. This was the last show of his tour. He mentioned a couple times that they had been on the road with Sierra Ferrell for a few weeks. We're going to talk about this when we get to Sierra Ferrell. I mean, her tour is just,
oh my God,
ball grinding.
They work really hard.
So, I'm sure he was happy to be back home. And again, like I mentioned before, just being on that stage, man, in that venue in Memphis, Tennessee, you could tell it meant something to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I will give his set a solid thumbs up. I thought he was great. I thought his players were all cool. In fact, they had sort of an equipment malfunction where the drummer's pedal broke mid-song, and they came out and they changed the drum pedal, and you would have never even noticed.
I actually didn't notice that at all.
Because it was so seamless in its execution. Anyway, after that, you and I decided that we were going to go down and try to get a little bit closer to the stage for the Queen, Sierra Ferrell, one of Marina's top 5 favorite artists of all time. We found a pretty legitimate spot on the side of the stage, down in the standing area.
Yeah.
And Sierra Ferrell and her band came out. Now, you and I had seen Sierra Ferrell not overly long ago on her second night of a 2-night residency at the Ryman Auditorium here in Nashville. A show that, again, this is not necessarily my luggage, but it was a show that I thought was really good. So my expectations for this show were pretty high. What were your expectations as her and her band came out on stage?
I was just happy to be there. I think it was great seeing a show at the Overton Park Shell, and Sierra Ferrell is always over the top with her, a stage performance, and we'll get to it, she always has something positive to say. That's going to piss some people off, but whatever. I was just happy to be there. And it wasn't, I will say I feel like people are more behaved at the Ryman. There were some shitty fans, and I think that's something I've heard with a couple shows. I know there's like a fight at the Portland show and things like that. There's just some shitty fans in the pit. We actually ended up we were in the pit for like the first couple songs, and we decided to leave because this guy in front of us was drunk and on his phone and smoking weed and blocking our view. And I guess I don't know if I'm just getting old, but I'm just like, I'm going to go watch from there. It's not even worth the energy, so. Yeah,
we found a spot right by the side of the stage, and it was pretty good. I think we were there for the first 2 or 3 songs.
Yeah, 2 songs, so yeah.
And this guy comes up, and of course he barges his way in. And there's this thing down here in the South, and maybe it's because I'm not a native Southerner, but I don't get it. And this guy was just belligerently hammered. and disrespectful and smoking weed, which I don't even care about, honestly. I'm not a consumer of that product, but if you are, I don't particularly care.
We're from California.
I've done enough dirtbag things in my life to where that doesn't bother me. But one thing that bothers me about the South, and this is what this guy was, is there's a subculture of people down here, not everybody, but there's a subculture of people down here who, for whatever reason it is, whatever college they go to. Now, this guy was probably my age. I mean, he looked terrible, but he was probably my age. And he's wearing his stupid Ole Miss gear, which is the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Tennessee. And there's a thing down here.
Oxford, Mississippi.
Where, what did I say?
You said Oxford, Tennessee.
Oxford, Tennessee. Oxford, Mississippi. You better not. SEC fans don't like that. But they go to college down here, and then it just becomes their whole life. Yeah. It's like, it's definitely like their glory days. It becomes like that stereotypical uncle who's like, yeah, you remember that Pleasant Valley game in 1978 when I scored 4 touchdowns? No. Nobody remembers that except you. But these guys, they still wear the dumb shirts, and they refer to their college football teams as us. And somebody one time told me, they're like, well, you're not from here. You don't get it. It's charming. Yeah. And I say, no, it's not charming. It's pathetic. You don't have to be from here to understand it. But that's what this guy
that stuff doesn't bug me. But, if you're going to be on your phone, just don't be a dick. Like, don't be at the front of the stage on your phone when you're watching, in my opinion, probably one of the best performers to come out of this generation. That's why I love seeing shows to the Ryman. I feel like people are very respectful. Because, the Ryman was a church, wasn't it? Mm. So it does kind of feel like you're in this kind of sacred, holy ground. Yeah.
And I do feel like, and the Overton Shell, to me, should receive that same respect.
I agree with that.
She's right. You go to the Ryman, and people are just... They understand where they're at, typically. And for some reason at the Ryman, too, you don't have people's phones up in your face all the time, like every other show you go to, for some reason. But
and Sierra Ferrell cannot control the people that come to her concerts, No,
I'm not asking her to do that, but I'm just saying, like, this guy was a
I'm gonna blame the country music fans on this one, guys.
Yeah, you want to talk about punk rockers being a bunch of degenerates? I'm going to stand up for my tribe here and say that every time I've gone to one of these shows with her, people are 10 times more plastered than they ever get when you go to a punk rock show, at least in my opinion. There were people just partied out. Some girl... So, Marina and I end up getting separated because she goes back up this crowded hill, and I'm clumsy, and I can't see at night because I'm an old man. So I'm like, all right, you go hang out on the hill. I'll just find a place down here. So we get separated. And towards the end of the show, this girl, and nothing against her, she's a young girl, she's having a good time, but she's walking by, I'm staying over by where the merch area is. And can we talk about how much money Sierra Ferrell makes on merch?
Oh, yeah. I bought a couple shirts.
It's a 2-mile long line the entire night. But this girl's walking by the merch table, and suddenly she does and pig starts coming out the side of her hand over here, and it almost hit the merch table. I was like, are you serious? Yeah. You never see that at a punk. Well, you wouldn't.
Well, come on, yeah. Punk rockers. I like to think punk rockers are a little bit more just polite. Pros. Yeah, sure, yeah. Anyway, let's get to the concert.
Anyway, she comes out with her band, and the first song that they go into is a song called "I Could Drive You Crazy."
Yes, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about this show, and this is not me throwing rocks, but you could tell pretty much right away that her and her band, and like I mentioned before, this tour is just ball busting that they are on. They came in to this show in Overton Park from Dallas, Texas, and the night they were leaving Memphis, they were playing the next night in South Carolina. So they are putting some serious mileage in on this tour, and in big increments in short amounts of time. But I could tell right away, and again, this is not a dig, because I have all the respect in the world for what she does, but you could tell right away pretty much that this band's gas tank was getting pretty empty, because the energy level of this show was not what it was at the moment.
and it was a hot day, and it was a hot day, and they have just traveled miles and miles and miles. I would love to, it's not, I'm not a touring musician, but I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, please take care of yourselves. Don't push yourselves too hard. We all love you and we want to see you, but we can wait. I don't mind waiting. But, all that being said,
They sounded great.
They're professionals, yeah.
And I mentioned this before when we saw her at the Ryman Auditorium. You know, her and her band are all based here in Nashville, Tennessee. And when you are an artist that is based here in Nashville, Tennessee, I mean, the musicians that you have to choose from here to fill out your band is the ultra elite. I mean, these are not guys that you are buying off the shelf at Walmart. This is the flakiest crust. I mean, imagine the talent of the people that don't get picked for bands in this city.
Yeah.
Must be crazy. So when I say that their energy level seemed a little bit off, I don't mean that as an insult, because they are working their asses off on this tour. But they sounded great, and her players, it was the same band we saw at the Ryman. They are all just top-notch.
Yeah.
Second song she came out and played is probably my favorite song of hers. And this is not... I'm not speaking to you as an expert, so if this is a generic choice, you'll just have to bear with me. But I'll Come Off the Mountain is probably my favorite song of hers.
I think it's a generic choice, yeah. I think
they
my
killed
favorite.
it.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that was good.
After that, they go into Jeremiah, which is another song at least I'm familiar with. Based on,
I would say it's one of her hits.
She played Give It Time.
I think this is around the time that we pieced out from the super drunk guy at the front, so I don't remember this one super well.
I think this was the song we were sort of in transit. Then
Yeah.
she played Why'd You Do It, which is a song that I'm not super familiar with. And then she played a song that I know based on the original version, or an older version at least, Chitlin Cookin' in Cheatham County, which is a song originally done by the Arthur Smith Trio.
Okay, chitlins are like innards.
Chicken innards, I guess.
Yeah, I think, right? Correct us if we're wrong, but I'm pretty sure, yeah.
From there, she went into Money Train, and then the band left the stage, and she did 2 solo songs, which I thought were really cool. It's funny, this singer, Sierra Ferrell, I mean, she is about 3.5 feet tall, but she commands an audience. I mean, to watch her, and she's still relatively young, I would make the observation, but you know, she can hold a crowd in the palm of her hand, and I really noticed that. Now, these 2 songs, Rosemary in the Garden, these aren't necessarily songs that I'm familiar with, but watching her out there alone, it was mesmerizing, because it was like, wow, she is just this tiny little munchkin, and she's got, 4,000 or 5,000 people just hanging on her every...
Yeah, I think Rosemary, I think that's the murder ballad that she wrote. That one's great. And then The Garden, I think she wrote for the Hunger Games soundtrack. And then she kind of spoke before she sang The Garden about how it's funny because she kind of goes into these, I think, really kind of profound spiritual things that I think some people probably don't want to hear at the show, but I wanted to hear it. But she kind of talked about how your words have a lot of weight, and that's the energy that you're putting out into the world. And she always said that she would never have like a home and a garden again, and now she does, and that's kind of what the song was about. So that was really cool.
Again, I think I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about Nick Shoulders, and I'm not trying to be disparaging or make fun of people, but I feel like sometimes when she goes into these, not rants, but when she goes into these little introductions to these songs, sometimes I feel like these are these sort of moments when you can really see the split in the fan base, because you've got people that are all in on some of this inclusivity and positivity, and then you've got people that maybe aren't on board. After that, she went into another cover, a song by the Osborne Brothers called Lonesome Feeling. This is a song that I knew because of an older version of it. From there, she got a couple of ocean-themed songs, The Lighthouse and The Sea. Then she did Bells of Every Chapel, which I really liked. That was a song that I don't remember hearing, but I do remember specifically.
That's another one she brought out like a bell on stage and talked about vibrations and sound healing, and that was cool.
And then she went into Far Away Across the Sea, Why Haven't You Loved Me Yet? And then a song, of course, I remember hearing at the Ryman, because it's a very well-known song. Chris Christopherson song, Me and Bobby McGee, of course. Everybody knows the Janis Joplin version of that song. Her version of it reminds me very much of... She can really channel Janis Joplin.
She can, yeah.
I feel like if they make a biopic of Janis Joplin, she would not be a bad person to play.
That'd be cool.
When she sings that song, man, she really can
got power.
Do that voice.
Yeah, and she's petite as well.
And I would, I would make the argument, again, not throwing rocks here, because I thought the show was great, but, she was not at her most energetic during the show at Offer, but during Me and Bobby McGee, her voice just really came alive. I mean, to me, maybe it was the sound of the venue. Maybe I don't.
Yeah.
But the band and her were all very muted. I mean, they didn't sound.
Well, I mean, it's seeing a show at the Ryman as your first time seeing somebody. God, you're just really. It's hard to get better than that. Honestly.
Yeah.
It is.
From there, she went into what is one of her newer big songs, probably my second favorite song of hers, again, generic, American Dreaming. She sort of did a little bit of a pre-intro into the song, and then she did kind of an outro of this song. After she played the song, American Dreaming, she mentioned the fact that no matter how many times she plays this song, it never stops meaning a lot and being very heavy to her personally. I know this is a song that you like a lot. She did Dollar Bill Bar after that, Fox Hunt, and then came out and did a 2-song encore, which was a John Anderson song called Years, and then she finished everything off with In Dreams.
And she brought Nick Shoulders out, and they all... It wasn't Nick... No, I think they had one more song after that.
I don't know. That's the set list that I wrote down.
Okay.
I could have missed one.
I could be wrong, but I do know Nick Shoulders came out. Good night, Irene.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm going to look it up real quick. I believe.
I was trying to write these down as the show was going on, so I may have missed one. It's possible, but all in all, I thought that the show turned out to be really
Irene
good.
Goodnight. Yeah, Irene Goodnight, which I guess is a. Is it a Lead Belly song? I don't know. We gotta look at it, but I think she closes a lot of shows with that. That's the song that she closed at the Ryman with the acoustic show.
Oh, I missed that one.
Okay, I think that was it.
Perhaps we were heading out towards the exit.
Perhaps we had to work the next day.
Anyway, I thought that the show turned out to be really good. Not quite as good as the show at the Ryman, but this is somebody I can tell you. I feel as if I have a sense when it comes to these things. This is somebody who is going to become mega.
Yeah, she just did a song with Post Malone, which is crazy. And I think her vocal, he doesn't like Post Malone. Her vocals were buried, which I thought was an atrocity. And she did a song with Zach Bryan. Once again, vocals were buried. Again, you got to give her her moment, man. She's just a talented lady.
I don't know who Zach Bryan is.
Yeah.
Not a fan of Post Malone, son. Anyway, from there, we left Overton Park, which is beautiful. By the way, if you've never been to Overton Park, and people, we told this to your mom and her stepdad, who are both, like us, Bay Area people, and if you've ever been to Overton Park, apart from just going to the show, Overton Park is the
it's jugs. So cool.
It is beautiful. I mean, Memphis is such a beautiful city. You know, I get so tired of people dumping on Memphis. But it reminds me, and again, this is probably a geographic bias, but it reminds me, in a way, of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. We mentioned that to your mom, and she just dismissed it. Didn't want to hear it at all.
It does. I think, you drive in and you have the museum and you have the Shell and you have a park with walking trails and a dog park and all kinds of things. It does very much feel like Golden Gate Park.
We spent the next day at the park, too.
We did.
It's just beautiful over there.
Great.
And that whole part of Memphis is the jugs.
Yeah.
Anyway, we left the park, and right across the street at a venue called Growlers, they were having a Sierra Ferrell post-show party featuring 2 artists. One of which I was semi-familiar with, and one of which I had no idea at all who they were. But this was my first time ever venturing into Growlers. I'm ashamed to say, because this place is pretty snug, and it basically represents everything that I love about Memphis, and that is it has this real community feel. You and I lived in Milwaukee for a couple years. It reminds me of Milwaukee in that sense. We lived in a neighborhood in Milwaukee that had a real tight-knit feel, and that is what Memphis reminds me of. But this place, Growlers in particular, is just the type of place that you don't find here in Nashville, and I have to say that my first impression of the place warmed my heart tremendously, because as soon as you walk in the door, the first thing that I noticed, at least, was a giant portrait of the late, great Omar Higgins from the band Negro Terror, a Memphis-based punk rock band who sadly passed away in 2019. And as soon as I see a portrait of my chum, Omar Higgins, my heart is immediately warmed.
Yeah.
We miss Omar Higgins every day. He was a huge and important member of the Memphis, dare I say, Tennessee music community, but the place Growlers was just
It was
awesome.
great. It was exactly what you want. It's just your small, local, DIY, labor of love kind of place with good people. Talk about a well-behaved crowd.
Yeah, that was a great crowd. And the two artists that we were there to see that night after the Sierra Ferrell show were a band that I was semi-familiar with based on your fandom and the fact that we had... I don't know that we saw them perform at Muddy Roots, but actually we ended up camping right next to them at Muddy Roots a couple years ago, and that is the Holy Locust from New Orleans.
I think they're from New Orleans. I think they're kind of from all over, but I think they're from New Orleans, yeah.
But they came out, and I got to tell you that this was a band that I was not overly familiar with, at least musically, but I was impressed by one thing, and that is that it has been a long time since I've seen a band that smelled that bad. But apart from that, musically, I thought that they were pretty good. They, in my opinion, are very sort of... It's not right to use the word typical, because there is no typical hobo punk sound, but they're a string hobo punk
they're just a crust punk band. Yeah.
The kids that you get the sense have been spending a lot of their years, riding on trains and writing songs about it. And actually, I got to say that I was sort of pleasantly surprised.
They were great.
Expectations were not overly high.
How many people are in the band? Like 8? They got
I think they have like 8
cello
players.
and a stand-up bass and accordion, guitar, all kinds of stuff.
Banjo.
Oh yeah, banjo.
Double bass.
Yeah, they played. They were playing Muddy Roots this year, which unfortunately we're not going, and they've played a couple of years we've been there. Speaking of that, Sierra Ferrell was supposed to play Muddy Roots in 2020. Yeah, I think that was the first year we were supposed to go, and then we all know what happened to that Muddy Roots.
She's definitely outgrown Muddy Roots.
Yeah.
But
that
this band, Holy Locust from New Orleans, I thought they were actually pretty good, pretty entertaining.
Yeah, they were fun.
Not somebody that I was
great musicians.
All familiar with.
Yeah.
Great musicians.
Yeah.
Interesting songwriters, but they could use a shower. So, if you want my house.
All right. This is where him and I agree to disagree. I don't care about that stuff.
I thought they were pretty snug. Anyway, the last band of the day was an artist from right here in Nashville. An artist that I literally knew nothing about this guy. And I remember when you showed me the flyer for the show, I originally thought that the name of the band was Ivy String Band. And I was like, that's kind of a cool name. I mean, all these bands are this string band or that string band. But it turns out I was wrong on both accounts because the artist's name is Four and the Strange Band.
Yes. I completely read it that way too. I thought it said string band. I just was like, string band.
Yeah, you assume if it's a certain genre of music.
Yeah. You think it's
string band, which it wasn't even this genre of music. Anyway,
it wasn't.
This is an artist based here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I got to tell you that of the 4 artists we saw over the night, no disrespect, but this was sort of my least favorite. This was an artist that, to me, and maybe this is because I live here in Nashville, but I get so tired of the tropey country music thing, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful because these guys were all good musicians, and they had a shtick that I just find tiresome.
Yeah, I think just living in Nashville, you get tired of you just get tired of and I love old country music. I do. I love the old school country. But sometimes you just want something a little bit different, which is I think why I love bluegrass, because it's so similar to country music, but it feels a little bit more authentic. I'm not saying country music is not authentic, obviously. But I honestly just think it's because we live in Nashville, and we just hear that music. We hear that music we literally were stopping at a gas station closer to Nashville, and it was funny, that divide of going from West Tennessee to Middle Tennessee, because it's the music you heard was totally different.
Yeah, Memphis,
you're getting close to Nashville now because here's the country music.
Yeah, in Memphis you hear either the early rock and roll or Stax or blues, and out here it's Jason Aldean
and maybe in West Tennessee you get tired of.
Yeah, I'm sure you
the
get
other
tired
stuff too.
of Robert Johnson.
Where you're I don't want to talk about Elvis anymore, right? Well, he does.
But anyway, this was an artist who, it was announced we're not halfway, but a couple songs into the show. It was funny, you and I were sort of thinking the same thing, because as he was playing, he came out. And now this band was totally different than the Holy Locust. This was not a string band. This was just a honky-tonk country band with 2 electric guitars, a bass, steel guitar, and a drummer. But as he started playing, I was thinking to myself, wow, this guy really loves Hank Williams. Now, I don't not love Hank Williams. I'm a Hank Williams fan, but I was like, wow, this guy really loves Hank Williams. It was announced after one of the songs towards the beginning set that this was Hank Williams' great grandson. So this is Hank III's son and Hank Jr.'s grandson.
Which is why
he goes by the name Four. Which, I don't know.
Yeah, we're both stupid, I guess. It was Roman numeral 4 and the Strange Band. So I had a kind of a duh moment there.
But once he said that, it became obvious because he looks a lot like his old man, Hank III, which, by the way, Hank III is 51 years old? You can't be serious. We're all getting old, son. I remember thinking, like, okay, Hank III must have had this kid when he was 12.
And I think he did have him pretty young.
Yes.
But it's one of those moments where you're like, how does this guy have a grown adult child? Yeah.
I saw Hank III a long time ago.
And this guy is like, well, maybe not your age, but he's
in
younger
his 30s.
than... He's like my age. So, yeah.
He's not exactly, 19 either. It's like, Jesus, I'm getting old. But as far as his show goes, he made it a point to tell the story of how he was Hank IV, but told the story of why he doesn't go by Hank IV, because he doesn't necessarily want to be a legacy artist, which I respect and I understand. But at the same time, he kept referencing Hank Williams throughout the set. And I got to tell you that, when you and I were there for the Holy Locust, I mean, the place was not packed, but there was a lot of people there. But after the Holy Locust played, the place sort of cleared out, and I would say he played to maybe 20 people. I mean, it was... Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say, I'm going to give the guy a lot of props for not just being like, oh, I'm Hank IV, and I respect that he's doing his own thing, and I think growing up in that family, he probably has a lot of love for country music, but he's trying to do his own thing, so I have a lot of respect for him for that. I
mean, I thought he was entertaining. He's a great musician.
It's very nice. We got to meet him at the merch table.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy. It's just, dude, for me, I don't care who you are, that tropey country stuff just doesn't stick to me.
Yeah, so. I just think it's being in Nashville. We just kind of get burned out on it. Maybe if we lived in Memphis and we didn't hear it a lot, it'd be different.
But I thought he was cool. He, like she said, he is a great guy. We met him at the merch table. She bought some shirts and a record, I think. But super nice guy. Couldn't have been any more friendly.
Yeah.
Had a great stage persona.
Why isn't he playing Muddy Roots? I think he should be at Muddy Roots.
I was thinking the same thing, honestly, because he's not. He was leaving Memphis and going north, whereas...
He was going up to Green Bay.
The Holy Locusts were going out to Muddy Roots. Anyway, like she said, we are not going to Muddy Roots this year because we are heading out to San Francisco in a few weeks, and we sort of have to compartmentalize our travel based on our work. So if any of you are heading out to Muddy Roots, have a good time. We will miss you. That pretty much sums up our musical weekend out in my favorite city. Let's just be honest here. Memphis, Tennessee. If you haven't been to Memphis, be sure to go out and check it out. Check out Graceland, Sun Records, Beale Street, all of it. We hung out. Actually, we didn't do Beale Street or Graceland on this trip because there's so much to do
and
in Memphis. Better. And I got to tell you right now, if you are interested in becoming morbidly obese, the food in Memphis is the jugs.
It's the best.
Son.
Yeah, it's the best.
I mean, the food in Nashville is good. I would make the argument. I always say the food in Nashville is underrated, but man, the food in Memphis...
Yeah.
If you could see the fat roll I'm sitting on right now, you would be impressed. Anything else to add before we...
No, it was great. Check out Holy Locust and Four and the Strange Band and Nick Shoulders. And if you're watching this, you probably already know Sierra Ferrell. They're all awesome.
Yeah, it was all great. Yeah. Great music in Memphis, my favorite city. So go check it out. All of those artists, if you have an opportunity to see any of them live, I wouldn't pass up on the opportunity. Again, if you're going to Muddy Roots, have fun. We'll miss you this year. Hopefully we'll be back next year. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee, along with...
Mars.
And her codependent best friend, Scratch the Chihuahua, who... Scratch had to go to the doctor today and get some shots, so she's a little worn out.
Yeah, she's tired.
We will forgive her for her lack of energy in today's episode.
Yeah, she didn't add much.
I will send a note on to her agent and let her know that we expect more in the future. Anyway, be sure to check out your local record store. Check back most weeks for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And on a programming note, it is my goal to make these Death on Mars more of a regular segment. So you have to bug her to get her little keister up here.
Yeah, comment if you want to see more of Scratch and myself. We bring a different perspective. If you want to see all the string band shit, that's what I'm into. Whereas Jamie, I think if we never saw another banjo at a concert, he'd probably be very happy.
Yeah, we mentioned not going to Muddy Roots. I gotta tell you, I love going to Muddy Roots, but by the end of the weekend, if I hear one more banjo, there's a chance that I might go on a shooting spree. Anyway, until next time, my friends. Talk to you then.